And welcome everyone to Sports Talk Line, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. And on today's episode of Battle for the Big East, we got Mike DeCourcy on. Mike, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing okay. And I mean, it's definitely been a very interesting time in college athletics, to say the least. We have the transfer rule going through. NIL has been cleared. There are alliances forming, alliances falling apart. Whenever I hear the word alliance, I think of an Office episode. I don't know if I'm the only one else who does. But since realignment is a big thing going on, and a lot of the realignment is because of football. How do you see realignment impacting the NCAA basketball tournament? Because last time I checked, the NCAA isn't allergic to money.
Right. Well, that's something that gets talked about a lot, and you often hear people, mostly people who aren't involved in either the operation or from the media, the coverage of college athletics on a day-to-day basis. I've been doing it for the better part of 40 years. And so when I talk about these things, I don't just speculate and fantasize. I've heard so many times that one day college athletics, the major conferences will be all four. There will be 4 16-team super conferences. And my reaction to that is always, who is going to step in and bring that kind of symmetry to college sports, given the wild nature of the landscape over the past 25, 30 years? Now, there's no symmetry in college sports. They're not all going to sit there in a line in neat little pockets of 4 16-team leagues. It doesn't. And from the practical standpoint of where they are now, with one that is 16 teams, a couple others that are 14, one that is 12. How are you going to decide who goes where to get to 16? And why would any of the other 3 that aren't 16 right now want to take on what are essentially burdens? I mean, there isn't any money making out there for you. If there were programs, universities, athletic departments, however you want to classify this, that would make the other 3 leagues, ACC, Pac-12, and Big Ten, money, they would go after them. But there's no money in it. There's no money in the remaining Big 12 members. So that you won't see that. So the second question is, the speculation is that whatever format they're in, they'll go off and they'll do their own tournament. Well, the people that I've dealt with, and I think the alliance that developed in August between the ACC, Pac-12, and Big Ten was a good step in terms of the defense of the NCAA tournament. But the people that I've talked to in the past, most of whom have since retired, have always understood that there's $1 billion right now in 3 weeks of basketball in the NCAA tournament. Now you can take the power schools and make your own tournament, and you can keep all the money, but that money will be all yours. But it still won't be as much money as you make from the $1 billion that gets paid out by Turner and CBS, and also ticket sales, et cetera. In a couple of years, it'll be more than $1 billion just from Turner and CBS. In 2025, the payout jumps to that. That's an incredible figure for 3 weeks of college basketball. It dwarfs what everybody else makes during the regular season. So it doesn't make economic sense for the Power 5 or the Power 6 or whoever you want to put in that category. It doesn't make economic sense for them to mess with the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament is this magical formula that captures the public's attention in ways that defy a full appreciation of what college basketball's audience is. It's widely underestimated, but even at that, it's not near the audience for the NCAA tournament. 2 of the top 20 televised events in the first half, in sporting events, the first half of the year 2021, of the top 20, the only 2 that weren't football games were championship game Baylor Gonzaga, Final Four game UCLA Gonzaga. That's it. They're the only two. There were 9 others in the top 50 from this year's tournament, and even games involving Oral Roberts and Loyola nearly cracked the top 50. It just shows you the appeal of the tournament, and it's so widespread. So I think it's very important to say that is a sacrosanct element of college athletics, and that messing with that is a major mistake. And former Big East coach Mike Bray told me when I talked to him for an article about this, he said, look, the first item when the NCAA has their constitutional convention to address all those things, Tom, that you were talking about in the open, when they have their constitutional convention in November, the first thing they should do is say, don't mess with the NCAA tournament. That should be item number 1. Okay, we got that. Now we can move on, because it is too great a thing. And let me tell you something: the backlash, if any subset of college athletics teams or programs separated to join their own basketball tournament, to stage their own basketball tournament, the backlash would be enormous. In addition to the lack of interest that would follow, the backlash would be incredible. It just doesn't make sense to do that.
Yeah, I totally think. I just think it was funny when you saw the uproar over in Europe when they try to come up with the Ultra Champions League, whatever you want to call it. I'm thinking on the back of my head, man, American schools would do that no problem. You're trying to tell me Ohio State, Michigan. I just think the one thing that is so unique about college athletics is the team you hate the most, your biggest rival, they're your best business partner.
Correct. And the idea that the major schools would go off and form their own league in basketball, there's this idea that they need to do that in order to be free in football. Well, the reality is, I think that, again, this points to how people who talk about this often don't understand. Mm-hmm. Already you're free in football. The Autonomy 5, which is right now, and we don't know what will happen to the Big 12 or Texas and Oklahoma split, Big 12, Pac-12, Big 10, ACC, SEC. They make their own rules. You can follow others. Division I members can follow their rules, like cost of attendance, but they were the ones who wrote that rule and said, we're going to do this. And then it was up to you as a Division I member. Do I want to do this or do I don't? You don't have to, but you can. But they're going to, because that's their rule. So they make their own rules. They stage their own football championship. NCAA has essentially no involvement in the college football playoff. And then they also keep all the money from the college football playoff. So they don't need to separate from the NCAA to do what they want to do in football. They're already doing it. They've been doing it for a century.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting with football and how football impacts everything else. It's funny you mentioned Mike Bray, because Notre Dame is in the ACC in every sport, but an independent in football, which is getting a lot of people talking. But, changing it up to, with the form of this alliance, I don't know if I should do it Dr. Evil, because you said the $1 billion. But how do you see this alliance, which is kind of, we're still waiting to see how this shakes out. How does this impact out of conference scheduling? And do you see the end of the bye games happening, where a major university would invite maybe the local school nearby that's Division I, but doesn't make that much money, and be like, hey, listen, we'll give you X amount of dollars to come over here and play a game? Do you see that changing whatsoever? Because I really think that's the most interesting thing that can impact basketball with this alliance.
The bye game aspect is really dependent on what happens with the college football playoff. I subscribe to this. There is a belief that if you are going to have an expanded college football playoff, that you need to have a contracted college football season. That the 12th game was always a naked money grab anyway. There's no excuse for the 12th game based on the way it's scheduled. So many in the SEC don't even bother to schedule Division I FBS opponents. They just grab FCS opponents. Their fans can come out for a nice day in the sun. their fourth stringers can get some time on the field, and it's a joke. It's not real college athletics. So if you're going to put players through a playoff that may, for many of them or for some of them, be as long as 4 games, then you have to shrink the college football season by a game. If that were to happen, then yeah, you'd see a lot of those bye games go away. Maybe not all, but still some. And if they don't shrink the regular season, then I don't think will really be impacted at all. The alliances are, let's be honest, the alliance is being presented as a scheduling alliance. Well, there already is a scheduling alliance between the Big Ten and an ACC in basketball. Most of the football schedules are done well into the next decade. There might be a game that drops off here or there for whatever reason, but by and large, they are pretty much contracted up into the 2030s. So why is it presented that way? Because it sounds better than, look, if the SEC comes up with a bad idea in Autonomy 5 regulation, we're voting against it. That's simple. That's what it's about. There may be some impact on scheduling in basketball down the road between Pac-12 and Big Ten, maybe. There'll probably be some impact on scheduling in volleyball or track and field or whatever sport. But by and large, this is about we want to make sure that the SEC, with the power that they have now, inherent in Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, et cetera, that they don't come up with bad ideas and that we're ready to stand against them having bad ideas, up to and including separating and forming their own basketball championship.
Yeah, that is true. And I just think so too. You mentioned a great point before, Mike, about how you had Oral Roberts and Loyola Chicago, these Cinderella teams that can draw the casual viewer in, where, college football, I don't think has that as much. And I mean, the college football selection, that's always interesting to say the least. But since we're already talking about selection, let's try to jump in it too, because I know you usually, for Fox Sports, you've gone out and you've done your brackets, to say the least. Even though it's a little bit too early for brackets, we mainly focus on the Big East. What teams do you feel really strongly about in the Big East that are potential locks for the NCAA tournament coming up, even though we haven't yet played a game yet?
My biblical statement about locks is that in order to be a lock for the NCAA tournament, and you'll hear like in mid-January, people say, oh, they're a lock. My definition of a lock is you can afford to lose all your remaining games and still make it. And there are teams that get to a certain point where that happens. Even by mid-February, sometimes somebody might, like Kentucky 2015, reach that. They probably were in it in January. But for the most part, that's the idea. So there are no teams that can, in the Big East right now, lose all their remaining games because they'd be 0-30. So that's not a good idea. But I think if you're talking about teams that I feel very confident will be in the NCAA tournament, I think the list starts with Villanova. With Colin Gillespie coming back to run the show, they're going to be at minimum a very good team, and I think they're going to be exceptional. I don't think they're going to be a 2016 or 2018 Villanova team, but they've got a lot. Now, if Brian Antoine can become Brian Antoine again, and I always feel bad when guys like him have the kinds of injury problems that he's had that has set him back. I always hold out hope that he can become the player that he was when he was in high school. If he can do that, then perhaps they can become special. I don't know that that's the other issue that I have with them becoming truly special is they're not big. You look at their best teams, they had somebody near the basket that could swat down a shot, and that's not so much the case with this group. So a little bit problematic there, but they're going to be a really strong contender to win the league. It's certainly the favorite, and I think they'll do that. I know that a lot of people are looking at Seton Hall. They lost so much. Mama was such a great player. I think they'll be a tournament team, but they're going to have to improve in certain areas. St. John's I like a lot. Again, I think this team is built to play the way Mike wants to play. Posh Alexander has to play the whole season the way he played February. That's 3 times as much great basketball as he gave us last year. He was a really good freshman, but he was a great player in February. So if he can do that, I think that they can be right there. And then Xavier, this Xavier team is built to be really good. The problem with Xavier right now is that almost no one on that team has been on a very good team. They've all been on pretty good teams, not quite good enough teams. And so, Xavier's culture had always been, we know how to be great. And even if they had a dip in within season, or maybe even for a year, they were able to come back because everybody knew how to be great. And that's a problem for Xavier right now. They have to recover that. I think they've got a great chance to do it. I like their team. Little worried about point guard, but otherwise, I like everything about the Musketeers.
Yeah, and also too, you bring up some good points, and I'm going to transition to you. Kind of said those ones are the favorites, which are okay. Now, which teams do you think on the Big East do you see yourself being bubble teams? Because you mentioned Villanova, of course. No matter how crazy the year is, Villanova's number 1 in the Big East. It's going to be like that for a while. Just for, as long as Jay Wright's there, he has that magic elixir. I would say if you have a kid who's going to play college basketball, you want to send him to Jay Wright because he gets the most out of his players. And his players have solid NBA careers. They're not someone who are these one and dones who jump out and leaves. But getting back to the Big East, what teams do you kind of see on the bubble?
I think what I would say about UConn is that I wouldn't be at all surprised if they are right there with all the other teams I mentioned. Mm-hmm. But in order to do that, they have to find a consistent source of offense. They've got very good players, and it starts with having a really good point guard like R.J. Cole. But the rest of the group is guys who have had moments, guys who have been consistently solid, but now they need someone or a couple of someones to step forward and be the guy, on a fairly regular basis. The most successful teams in college basketball have someone who can go out there who if there is not extraordinary attention from the defense is going to go out there and get you close to 20. And if he does that often enough, then all of a sudden the defense starts having to do that. And if he's really special, he gets it for you anyway. And if he's just good enough, he's able to facilitate out of that extraordinary attention to make sure that the other guys who are left unchecked or lightly checked can get you the points you need to win. That's what I don't know whether UConn has. So I put them in the category of teams that if everything goes right, they'll be a solid team in the tournament. And if it doesn't quite happen like that, then I think they'll be fighting for a back of the field spot. Butler, I think, is somewhat the same. I think Butler's going to be an exceptional defensive team where they get points. At least, UConn a year ago had it from book night. Butler didn't have it a year ago. And so that's why they struggled at times. When Aaron Thompson was healthy, they were an extraordinary defensive team. He's a great on-ball defender at point guard. He's back, and hopefully he'll play the full year healthy. And so you'll see them be, again, an exceptional defensive team. Again, where do the points come from? And if they don't find a consistent source of offense, can they be so good defensively that they can be a high level team anyway? There have been those. We've seen them. And they are, like I said, this team is good enough defensively that they may be able to pull that off.
Yeah, I think too, you bring up two very intriguing points. UConn, when you look at UConn's roster, they really don't see a hole in them. It looks like they got a strong front court. You have a Cook coming back if he stays healthy. Adama Sanogo, they have a lot of promise going forward. Maybe some NBA draft people looking at him. You also mentioned R.J. Cole. We have Andre Jackson. They're kind of waiting to see. So I think those sophomores developing, but there's something that's kind of missing from the UConn team. No one can really figure it out. And I think both UConn and Butler are kind of in the same way. Both of them can defend, can they actually score the ball is going to be the challenge. But also the one thing with Butler, they got Hinkle magic, which is something that you got to come into. But it's also too, you know, we kind of talked about how Villanova is the class of the Big East. And if you get a win against Villanova, that's going to make your NCAA tournament resume. Do you see any other teams besides Villanova? Because last year you could probably say Creighton would have been that marquee win if you got that. I'm not sure if there's any other team besides Villanova you see being that marquee win out of the Big East.
Well, I think that depends on how St. John's and Seton Hall develop, which they could be those kinds of teams. Again, Seton Hall has to paper over some significant losses, but they've got a lot of very good talent and a very resourceful coach. And St. John's, like I said, I think this group is built to play the way Mike Anderson wants to play. And you know, it starts with a terrific point guard who should be much better as a sophomore than he was as a freshman. It includes, you know, the transfers that they've brought in. You know, I saw, you know, as an analyst at the Big Ten Network, you know, I saw a very lot of Aaron Wheeler. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they play half court ball at Purdue. That's what they do. They're fantastic at it. Aaron really did nice things for them at times, but I think being a full court player more often will help him. Montez Mathis, again, another guy transferring in from the Big Ten. They had so many wings at Rutgers. It was hard to stand out. You had to be special. Montez is special, but he's very good. They had a lot of very good. So it kind of became, okay, who's really special tonight? And we'll play a lot. And Montez had those nights. Well, now they have less in front of him. So maybe he's a 13 point, 14 point a game player. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I really like him. You know, you get Julian Champagny back. That's a lot of good players. And, you know, with a little bit of depth and a little bit of ingenuity, I think that they can become, a very successful team. Again, there's no one in this league, really, maybe even including Villanova, that you can say, if they just are okay, they've got so much talent, they're going to win a bunch of games and be really good. Mm-hmm. Everybody in this league is going to have to hit their high end in order to be successful, in order to get, you know, good wins out of the league, in order to get the kind of wins in conference that separate you from whatever the bottom of your league is. Mm-hmm. That's what has to happen at St. John's, Seton Hall, Butler, UConn. And I would even, to an extent, throw Marquette into that. I'm fascinated by Marquette. I think they're a really interesting team. Obviously, new coach, but the transfers they've brought in, I think are Kirk Quath from, and I may be saying Kerr's name incorrectly, from Oklahoma, a terrific shot blocker. Daryl Morcell, rock solid defender, leader. You know, he can change your program for only a year. He can change your program in terms of personality. I'll be interested to see how they choose to play at Marquette. It could be an all-out press. It could be half court. I don't really know what they'll do, but I know that whatever they choose to do, I feel really good about having Daryl Morcell to, you know, sort of be the foundation of that. Justin Lewis, freshman a year ago, really talented. I got a chance to see Olivier Prosper in the U19 World Cup for Canada, and really liked him. Thought he brought a lot. So, you know, again, that's another team that, if they, you know, when they get to that revolving door, if they go the right way, it could go well for them.
Yeah, Marquette is definitely interesting. I do like Justin Lewis's game. And speaking about marquee wins, make sure you get that win and hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube so you can see all our episodes of Battle for the Big East. But Mike, before I let you go, I'm going to bring up one last question, and that is, what do you think will be a bad loss in the Big East? Because a lot of times there could be some teams where it's like that marquee win gets negated by that bad loss. What do you think?
I think one of the things that's happened over the course of the year of course, of the past few years is that DePaul has gone from being an automatic bad loss to one that might be somewhat mitigated. And that's really the one that you say to yourself, that you don't know what they'll be. You don't know whether they'll be, a worthy team. And it's, they're obviously going through a coaching transition. It may be difficult for them. That's the one I think that if you look at it and you say, we really don't want to lose there. But I'm not sure how much longer that lasts. I think they've got a terrific athletic director. The new coaching staff might be able to push them forward in the right direction, a fresher direction, certainly, than where they've been. But for now, that's, obviously, as we look at the season, that's the one you're going to want to say for now, you'd probably not rather drop. But teams, the rest of the league, Georgetown lost a ton of talent, but, they still have the reigning Big East tournament MVP or MOP or whatever they call them there. They still have, the character of the players who were able to win that tournament in that short period of time. So maybe they gain some confidence off of that. Maybe it'll work for them. Creighton with Mac, they're not going to be down very far, and they may not be down at all. Mm-hmm. So I think the one thing the Big East has going for it is, the solid nature of the programs involved, and the lack of likelihood that anyone will play or perform too poorly.
All right, Mike, before we leave, can you tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
Yes, on Twitter at TSNMike. Been my Twitter handle, and I'm now verified, so I'm definitely me. So that's I've got my check mark, and I'm ready to roll. You can find me there, and you can find me at sportingnews.com if you prefer to go directly to the front page. You can always do that. I am an active tweeter, so you'll see lots of material from me all the way through the basketball season and beyond.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Mike. Hopefully we can have you on once those brackets become solidified. But remember, everyone, to listen like you play with intensity.